following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TFNG coming to you with a video review of the Transformers Generations War for Cybertron Trilogy Kingdom Leader Class Ultra Magnus. Wow, what a mouthful that was. So yes, Ultra Magnus, as you can tell by the product photos looking here at the back of his box, it is not a new mold, it is a retool of the Siege version of Ultra Magnus that was released in 2019. And at first, a lot of Transformers fans and collectors were disappointed when it was announced that Kingdom Ultra Magnus wasn't a new mold and that he was just a retool of the Siege version of Ultra Magnus. But in the months since Kingdom Ultra Magnus was initially released, I've seen quite a few collectors and fans say that Ultra Magnus, he is pretty decent looking, and he rivals the Siege version of Ultra Magnus in potentially being the best G1 looking Ultra Magnus figure we've gotten from Hasbro and Takara Tomy. So I actually took Ultra Magnus out several months ago when I bought him for the first time, so that's why I started off the video showing off the back of his box. So here's the front of his box. There's artwork of Ultra Magnus in his alternate mode, and here he is in his robot mode. And unfortunately, unlike here on the box art, Ultra Magnus does not have individual articulation in his fingers, so he cannot be pointing heroically like he is here on his artwork. On the top of the box, Ultra Magnus is an Autobot. On this side of the box, you've got the poster image for the Kingdom line. On the bottom of the box, you've got the authentic Transformers logo. And coming around here to the back of the box, here you've got Ultra Magnus in his standard robot mode, his inner robot mode, and his vehicle mode of a more Earth-style looking semi-truck. And Ultra Magnus transforms from the inner robot mode to his regular armored up robot mode in 21 steps. He transforms from his inner robot mode to the tractor cab section of his vehicle mode in just 12 steps. And he transforms from robot mode to his full-on vehicle mode of an Earth semi-truck in just 16 steps. And that's pretty much it for the box. Let's take a look at the Ultra Magnus figure itself. Alright, and so here's Kingdom Ultra Magnus opened up and out of his box, and right off the bat, those of you with a keen eye will notice there is something different about Ultra Magnus, and that is because I decided to give my copy of Kingdom Ultra Magnus the weapons accessory pieces that came with Netflix Bumblebee. And that's because Netflix Bumblebee does not have any weapons stored at all in his vehicle mode, and main reason I decided to give Ultra Magnus Netflix Bumblebee's laser gun on parts, I will explain and why when we transform him and take a look at him in alternate mode. But again, as I said a moment ago, Kingdom Ultra Magnus, he's not an entirely new mold. He is in fact a retool of the Siege version of Ultra Magnus that was released back in 2019. One thing that some Transformers fans and collectors were disappointed about was that the Siege version of Ultra Magnus came with these two black laser guns, which were designed for the second use of this mold. The Kingdom Ultra Magnus is the third use. The second use of the mold was the Galaxy Upgrade Optimus Prime figure that was also released in the Siege line, just like Siege Ultra Magnus. I apologize for not bringing that Optimus Prime figure out. It was buried underneath a bunch of my other Transformers action figures. But yes, here is Kingdom Ultra Magnus next to the Siege version of Ultra Magnus. Unfortunately, the Siege version is slightly taller due to having taller shoulder towers, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of Transformers fans and collectors were initially upset about getting Kingdom Ultra Magnus was him not having the two black laser guns that the Siege version came with, yet still being sold for the same price tag. A lot of Transformers fans and collectors couldn't justify Kingdom Ultra Magnus having only one of the three laser guns that the Siege version came with, because in the minds of most Transformers collectors and fans, the retooled parts that were done on the War for Cybertron Trilogy Ultra Magnus figure to turn him from a more Cybertronian looking semi-truck to a more Earth-style looking semi-truck, it didn't justify the lack of accessory pieces that the Siege release came with. But all the griping that collectors and fans have had aside, I do enjoy the fact that the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus doesn't have any of the battle damage markings that infamously made the Siege version of Ultra Magnus stand out from past figures due to all the silver paint used here on his robot mode chest. So the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus is a nice clean cut looking version of Ultra Magnus. He doesn't have any of the battle damage markings on him at all. And as I said, he does some of the retooled parts that the Kingdom Ultra Magnus figure gets is new shoulder towers. He does get a new robot mode chest, which is much more accurate to the Generation 1 version of Ultra Magnus. One of the shoulder towers does look like it does have the space for a flat surface for an Autobot logo like the Generation 1 Ultra Magnus action figure had, but unfortunately Hasbro decided to not put an Autobot logo on there. But if you have enough spare Autobot logo stickers lying around, you can put a decent sized one there on Ultra Magnus's and just Agnes's shoulder if you are so desire to see him with that. Just like the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, the Kingdom Ultra Magnus action figure, it only has one Autobot logo painted on him, tampographed on him, which is right there on the front bumper section of his semi mode. And in robot mode, it does end up on Ultra Magnus's buttocks, so that's a little disappointing to see. That's where the one place where Ultra Magnus's Autobot logo is where the Decepticons can literally kick his butt. But joking aside, one feature that the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus has that the Siege version lacks is he does have a piece of clear blue plastic on the back of his head, so he does have light piping. I apologize for not having a flashlight nearby to show the light piping off, but it is there and it is pretty impressive looking. He does come with new rocket launch pieces. The laser gun that Kingdom Ultra Magnus does come with is the exact same one that came with the Siege version. It's just done in a darker shade of silvery gray. And here on the legs, the legs are actually pretty much the exact same as the Siege version of Ultra Magnus. The most noticeable difference is all the way down here on his ankles. He has more Earth-style looking tires for his vehicle mode of a semi-truck. That's pretty much it. Bringing the Siege version of Ultra Magnus back. Here on the back of them, they do come with the exact same red backpack X section. The Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus is a slightly darker shade of red compared to the Siege version. I honestly was expecting that to be the opposite, that the Siege version would have the darker shade of red and the Kingdom version would have the brighter shade of red, but that appears not to be the case. But all in all, I do enjoy all the retooled parts that went into distinguishing the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus from the Siege version. And it's kind of hard to tell looking at them from a distance, but another retool part Ultra Magnus gets is right there on his robot mode pelvis. His waist piece, the top of it, is a new sculpted part. But yeah, all in all, I do thoroughly enjoy having Kingdom Ultra Magnus in my Transformers collection. Ultra Magnus is my second favorite Autobot after Optimus Prime. Yes, that's pretty much it. He does have a decent amount of articulation, a swivel joint in the head so he can look left and right 360 degrees. He has universal joint on his shoulders so his arms can rotate clockwise and counterclockwise 360 degrees. In order for his arm to extend out as far as it will go, you do have to take the rocket off the shoulder. So that is a little bit of a letdown, but I can easily overlook it. He does have a swivel joint in the bicep, hinge joint in the elbow, and he does have wrist swivels, but on my copy of Ultra Magnus, the wrist swivels are a little tight. He does have waist articulation, but the waist piece is the entire waist torso, it's not actually at the pelvis where you might think it would be. So you do have to be careful when swinging it around like that. He does have ratchet joints in his hips, so his legs can go forward that far, and unfortunately, they can't even go back one ratchet click due to his torso being rather large in the back. He does have swivel joints in the thighs, but as you can see right there, here in the middle, because Ultra Magnus's legs are so wide and the thigh swivel joints itself are actually much smaller, they will bump into each other. And even though his legs are permanently displayed in a sprawl-legged pose, he still has tilts in the ankles, so you can get him into an even wider legged pose. And he does have ratchet joints in the knees, but to get the knee to bend back far, again, because the upper half of Ultra Magnus's legs are so much smaller than the lower half of his legs. Most of his articulation does end up getting limited due to the fact that he uses tiny joints to move huge parts of him around. But overall, I can overlook that, and due to just how amazing Ultra Magnus looks. And for those of you wondering about the Netflix movie pieces, I decided to put these two smaller pieces here on Ultra Magnus's leg, same spot as the Siege version. And this piece I decided to put at the end of Ultra Magnus's laser gun and make it like almost like a silencer, like Generation 1 Megatron. So without further delay, let's get Ultra Magnus's armor off and take a close look at his inner robot mode. Oh, come on. Sorry about that, my camera was giving me a little difficulty, so let's now get down to Ultra Magnus's inner robot mode. Alright, here is Kingdom Ultra Magnus in his inner robot mode, and whew! The Kingdom Ultra Magnus figure itself actually wasn't what took me a long time to transform off camera. It was actually the Siege version of Ultra Magnus. The Siege version of Ultra Magnus, the joints are much stiffer compared to the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus, and that's actually a good thing because it's easier for their accessory pieces to be put on and pop off on the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus compared to the Siege version, especially the armor panels for the standard robot mode is what I call it. Ultra Magnus's armored up mode. On the Kingdom version, the arm pieces come on and off of those 5mm pegs on the lower arms much easier compared to the Siege version. So yes, here they are in robot mode side by side. They do have the exact same head sculpt. The main difference between the heads, sorry for having them sideways, but it's the best way to see them next to each other. On the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, he has more of a powder blue mouth plate, and the head crest matches up, whereas on the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus, the mouth plate is darker than the Siege version, and the head crest is done silver, and the blue mouth plate is much closer to matching the blue plastic used on the two windows for the windshield, chest, and yes, overall, the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus, it's not just my camera. In hand, you can see it as well. This is actually more of a solid white plastic, whereas on the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, it's more like an ivory white plastic, so it's not a bright solid white plastic like the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus is. And yes, the arms are the same, and the hands are the same, the fists are the same. Um, the backpacks, which form the front bumpers, are completely different, and even the back panel sections are different as well. The legs themselves are the exact same. The one noticeable difference is that the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, in addition to having some of the battle damaged markings on the thighs, these uh, rectangles on the knees, I don't know what those would be considered, panel sections. They're painted silver on the Siege version, but on the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus, they're unpainted. And then, of course, the main difference on the legs are the wheels. The Siege version of Ultra Magnus has more Cybertronian-looking wheels, while the Kingdom Ultra Magnus has more Earth mode-style vehicles. And, of course, the main difference between the two is the two robot mode chests. Ultra Magnus has a more Earth-style truck, so he's got windows, and it makes him look a lot more like Optimus Prime, which is similar to the inner robot mode of the Generation 1 version of Ultra Magnus. Compare that to the Siege version, where he's got these huge window sections, and of course the robot mode pelvis. Surprisingly, even though the waist pieces for the pelvises for the combined or standard robot mode were different. On the inner robot mode, they're the same. The difference is that at the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, it's more of a metallic turquoise, whereas on the Kingdom Ultra Magnus, it's blue. And it's not metallic at all. Oh, so yeah, at first glance, So yeah, at first glance, you might trick yourself into thinking because there's a lot of retooled parts used on the regular robot mode that the inner robot mode might have just as much retooling, but most of the retool parts have been in the robot mode chest and also the backpack pieces which form the front bumper, and of course the wheels, and that's pretty much it. The only difference is the paint job, and I really dig the much brighter, more solid, pure white of the Kingdom Ultra Magnus compared to the ivory white or off-white of the Siege version of Ultra Magnus. And of course, the gray parts are all the same. I won't go too much into the articulation on the inner robot mode since the same joints that were used in the regular robot mode are pretty much the same on here. And yes, that is Ultra Magnus's inner robot mode. So let's get down to transforming him into his vehicle mode, and we'll wrap up the review doing a look at him in his alt mode. Alright, and here is Kingdom Ultra Magnus transformed into his alternate mode of a semi-truck. And this is the main reason why I gave Kingdom Ultra Magnus Netflix Bumblebee's laser gun weapons. Because of the new retooled parts, Ultra Magnus's tractor cab section sits up several inches forward from the trailer compared to the Siege version. So unlike the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, the shoulder towers don't connect to the back X section here, and the top of the trailer doesn't sit flush over the truck cab, and what that has done resulted in is Ultra Magnus's robot mode hands end up being exposed. So when he's transformed into his vehicle mode, and so I already posted photos of this a few months ago on tfw2005.com, but I gave Ultra Magnus Netflix Bumblebee's laser guns to hide his hands here in vehicle mode, and they look like a pair of additional shoulder cannons that he has in vehicle mode to defend him from any Decepticons. So yeah, I think it works out pretty great. Okay. But yeah, all in all, unfortunately, what Hasbro was going for in trying to make Ultra Magnus a more Earth-style looking semi-truck, they didn't retool any of Ultra Magnus's legs. So unfortunately, Kingdom Ultra Magnus, he doesn't quite look like an Earth-style semi-truck when he's transformed into his vehicle mode, and the Earth mode tires don't really help with that. You do have to use your imagination to imagine Kingdom Ultra Magnus being a more Earth-styled semi-truck. Whether or not we're going to get a new Ultra Magnus figure that has a trailer that transforms into a car carrier trailer, just like Generation 1 Ultra Magnus, is uncertain at this point. We technically got one way back in 2015 in the Combiner Wars line when Combiner Wars Ultra Magnus was released. And again, bringing the Siege version of Ultra Magnus in for a size comparison. The Siege version of Ultra Magnus, the way the truck cab was designed, it makes the Siege version of Ultra Magnus look like a mashup of both the Generation 1, but also the Robots in Disguise version of Ultra Magnus. And a lot of Transformers fans and collectors liked that appearance about the Siege version of Ultra Magnus. And the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus, and yes, with the way the trailer is almost the exact same as on the Siege version. Unfortunately, the Kingdom Ultra Magnus, instead of looking completely like Generation 1 Ultra Magnus, it looks like a mashup of both Generation 1 and the Siege version of Ultra Magnus in truck mode. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Pretty much the parts where Ultra Magnus looks like an Earth-style truck is the front of the tractor cab, which we kind of saw when we looked at his inner robot mode. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The back of the truck is virtually the same. The top of the vehicle is virtually the same, even with that extra piece from Bumblebee that I have attached to Kingdom Ultra Magnus' laser gun. And pretty much the only difference is that the Siege version of Ultra Magnus again has these black laser guns, and the Kingdom version does not. The same 5mm ports are there, so if you want to take those black laser guns off of Siege Ultra Magnus and give them to the Kingdom version, you can do that as well. But one thing to note is that because the Kingdom Ultra Magnus has been extended in it slightly, if I line them up from the back of the trailer, there's the extra inches added on to the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus, and if I line them up from the front of the truck cab, you can see Kingdom Ultra Magnus is slightly longer than the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, but unfortunately it doesn't really help to help promote the idea that he's supposed to be an Earth-style semi-truck. Looking at Ultra Magnus' trailer, even car carrier trailers, I've never seen one that looks quite like this one, so unfortunately, as far as following the phrase Asa being a robot in disguise, Kingdom Ultra Magnus fails to do that in his vehicle mode. But all things considered, I do think it's an incredible Transformers action figure. So, my final thoughts: do I recommend getting the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus and adding it to your Transformers collection? I only recommend getting Kingdom Ultra Magnus if you absolutely love Ultra Magnus like I do. And if you don't mind the fact that the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus is mold mates with the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, then this is the figure for you. If you like the Siege version of Ultra Magnus enough and you don't think that the retool arts are enough to convince you to add this figure, then figure that Ultra Magnus can be a bit of a pass, as if you don't like his lack of laser guns that the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus got. If you have the Netflix version of Bumblebee, or if you have Earthrise Cliffjumper or Generation Selects Hubcap app, I do highly recommend you get the laser gun pieces from the Earthrise Cliffjumper mold, and you give them to Kingdom Ultra Magnus, because in vehicle mode, those laser guns do help hide his hands in alternate mode, and it is an improvement over it. But yes, I do by all accounts recommend getting Kingdom Ultra Magnus if you can find him at a decent price. That's where I'm biased, is that Ultra Magnus is my second favorite Autobot. So even though the Kingdom version of Ultra Magnus, when he was announced to be a retool of the Siege version, I jumped on the chance of getting him when he was first released. Overall, despite the flaws that I went on about, Kingdom Ultra Magnus is still a pretty decent figure. He does roll kind of well, but just like the Siege version of Ultra Magnus, there's a hairline of clearance here on the back wheels compared to his robot mode feet dangling there on the back. But yes, thank you guys all so much for watching the review. This has been the TFN Geek. Remember to stay safe, stay healthy. I've got more reviews incoming. So thank you guys all so much, and until next time, transform and roll out. Goodbye, everyone.